I never thought my marriage would end in a storm of betrayal and humiliation. My name is Ryan Thompson, 38 years old, an IT consultant based in Austin, Texas. For the past 10 years, I thought I was happily married to Amanda, my 35-year-old wife, a successful real estate agent. We have a beautiful home, no kids by choice, and a life that most people would envy. Or so I thought. It all started when Amanda began working late more often than usual. Client meetings, she'd say. The housing market is on fire right now. At first, I didn't think much of it. Amanda was ambitious and driven, that's one of the reasons I fell in love with her. But over the past few months, something felt off. She became distant. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes when we joked around. Date nights turned into nights where she was glued to her phone. And then there was the perfume, the same one she always wore, but stronger. Too strong. I brushed it off as paranoia, but deep down, a nagging suspicion started to grow. The breaking point came on a random Wednesday night. Amanda had told me she'd be home late, yet again, because she was showing a property to a wealthy client. Something about her tone didn't sit right with me. That night, after she left, I noticed she'd forgotten her smartwatch charging on the kitchen counter. My curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to take a peek. Amanda's watch was synced to her phone, and as soon as I unlocked it, the messages hit me like a freight train. There were texts from not one, but 3 different men. Their names were all saved with emojis, as if she thought she was being clever. Brandon, Mark, and Tyler. The texts were explicit, detailing plans to meet up, photos that I can't unsee, and conversations about their time together. My heart pounded in my chest. 3 men? 3? I couldn't wrap my head around it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, piecing together a timeline of lies. This wasn't some one-off mistake. This was a full-blown web of deception that Amanda had been spinning for months, if not years. I felt like I was going to vomit, but instead of reacting immediately, I decided to dig deeper. If Amanda was lying to my face, I needed more proof. That's when I noticed an address in one of the texts. Brandon had sent her a message about meeting at his place later that night. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my car keys and decided to drive to the address. It wasn't far, just a few neighborhoods over. I parked a block away and sat in my car, heart racing, as I watched Amanda's car pull up to the house. She stepped out, wearing a tight red dress I hadn't seen before. It wasn't hard to guess who she was trying to impress. I waited about 20 minutes before deciding to approach. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I walked up to the house, and as I reached the front door, I could hear voices and laughter coming from inside. The blinds weren't completely closed, and through the gap, I saw her sitting on a couch between 2 men, Brandon and Tyler, based on their descriptions in the texts. They were drinking, laughing, and flirting as if they didn't have a care in the world. And then, as if the universe was mocking me, Mark walked into the room holding a bottle of wine. 3 men, my wife, all under one roof. I felt a wave of anger surge through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything, the laughing, the flirting, Amanda leaning into Brandon as he whispered something in her ear. It was like watching a stranger. I decided to knock on the door. The laughter stopped instantly. I heard shuffling and hushed voices before the door swung open, revealing Brandon, a tall, muscular guy in his late 20s. His cocky smirk disappeared the moment he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly caught off guard. "I'm looking for my wife," I said, my voice cold and steady. Amanda appeared behind him, her face draining of color the moment she saw me. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I said, stepping past Brandon into the living room. "I should be asking you that." The room fell silent as all 3 men looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Amanda stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but there was no way to explain her way out of this one. 3 men, Amanda? I said, holding up my phone. "Really? You couldn't just pick one?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she begged me to let her explain, but I was done listening. I turned to the men and said, "Enjoy her while you can, because after tonight, she won't have a husband to come home to." And with that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. My heart was shattered, but I knew one thing for sure: Amanda was going to pay for what she'd done. After walking out of the house, my mind was a whirlwind of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. 3 men, my wife, and who knows how long it had been going on? I drove home in silence, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. I spent the entire night poring through every shred of evidence I could find. I went through Amanda's smartwatch, her emails, her social media accounts, everything. At this point, I didn't care about boundaries or privacy. She'd crossed every line imaginable, and I was determined to uncover the full scope of her betrayal. By morning, I had pieced together a timeline. Brandon, the gym trainer, had been in the picture for about a year. He was the personal trainer she had supposedly hired to stay in shape. Mark, the business consultant, was someone she'd met during one of her real estate conferences. And Tyler, the wannabe rock star, was her fling from a bar downtown. But the texts revealed something even more disturbing. Amanda wasn't just cheating, she was orchestrating it like some kind of twisted game. She had separate schedules for each man, ensuring none of them would overlap. She used excuses like client meetings or property showings to carve out time for her affairs. It was methodical, calculated, cold, and yet, as I dug deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There were gaps in her messages, missing pieces that didn't quite add up. For instance, there were frequent references to someone called the boss. At first, I thought it might be some sort of inside joke or nickname for one of the men. But the more I read, the more ominous it seemed. There were cryptic messages like, "The boss wants us all to be careful, no sly pups. Meeting the boss tonight, don't worry, he's cool with everything. The boss is handling it, trust me." Who the hell was the boss? I couldn't let it go. I decided to do some digging on the address where I'd caught her the night before. It wasn't Brandon's house after all. A quick property search revealed that the house was registered under a shell company, one that led back to none other than Amanda's actual boss, Richard Hawthorne. Richard, 52, was the owner of the real estate agency where Amanda worked. He was a charismatic guy with a reputation for being handsome with his employees. I'd met him a couple of times at company events, and he always gave me this sleazy vibe, like he thought he was God's gift to women. Amanda used to roll her eyes whenever I mentioned it, saying, "He's harmless, just a bit of a show-off." But now, everything was starting to click. I decided to call in sick that day and do some reconnaissance. I parked outside Amanda's office building and waited. Around lunchtime, I saw her leave, wearing a sleek black dress and heels, an outfit far too fancy for a day at work. She got into her car and drove off, and I followed her from a distance. She didn't go to a restaurant or a property showing. She drove to a luxury hotel downtown. My stomach churned as I watched her hand her keys to the valet and walk inside like she owned the place. I waited 10 minutes before deciding to follow her in. I knew I was risking a scene, but I didn't care anymore. This wasn't just about catching her in the act, it was about understanding the full extent of her lies. The concierge gave me a suspicious look as I walked in, but I ignored him and headed straight for the elevators. I had no idea what floor she was on, but luck was on my side. As the elevator doors were closing, I saw Amanda step out of another elevator on the far side of the lobby, heading toward a private lounge area. I hung back, keeping out of sight as I watched her disappear through a set of frosted glass doors. I waited a few minutes before approaching, pretending to be on the phone as I slipped inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Amanda was sitting at a table with Richard Hawthorne, and she wasn't alone. Brandon, Mark, and Tyler were there too. They looked like a group of conspirators plotting their next move. I slipped into a corner where I could hear their conversation without being seen. What I heard was even more outrageous than I could have imagined. Richard was speaking in a low, commanding voice. "You all need to stick to the plan. If Ryan catches wind of this, it's over for all of us." Brandon chimed in. "He already showed up last night. Amanda, how are you going to handle him?" Amanda sighed, looking more annoyed than remorseful. "I'll deal with it. Ryan's a pushover. He's not going to do anything." My hands clenched into fists. A pushover? That's what she thought of me? But then Richard said something that changed everything. "You better, because if he finds out about the money, we're all screwed." "The money?" I leaned in closer, straining to hear every word. "Relax," Amanda said. "He doesn't know anything about the account. As long as we keep up appearances, he'll never figure it out." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. What account? What money? My mind raced as I connected the dots. Amanda wasn't just cheating on me, she was stealing from me. My salary, our joint savings, everything I had worked so hard for was funding her double life. And it wasn't just her. She was in cahoots with her boss and those 3 idiots. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. I left the hotel, shaking with anger and disgust. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was a full-blown conspiracy, and I was the target. But they had underestimated me. Amanda thought I was a pushover, and Richard thought he was untouchable. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. After leaving the hotel, I sat in my car for hours, replaying the conversation I'd overheard. Every word Amanda, Richard, and her trio of boy toys had spoken felt like a dagger in my back. They weren't just cheating on me, they were laughing at me, stealing from me, and assuming I was too weak or stupid to notice. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't just angry, I was determined. I spent the next few days pretending like nothing had changed. Amanda returned home that evening like it was just another day. She greeted me with her usual fake smile, asked how my day was, and made some half-hearted excuse about being busy with clients. I played along, hiding my fury behind a mask of indifference. While she slept, I got to work. The first step was to gather evidence. If I was going to take them down, I needed more than just suspicions and overheard conversations. Step 1: Tracking their moves. I started by installing a GPS tracker on Amanda's car. It was a simple device I ordered online, small enough to go unnoticed. Every time she left the house, I'd check her location on my phone. As expected, her work errands often led her to the same hotel downtown or Richard's office after hours. Next, I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom. I hated the idea of invading my own privacy like this, but I needed hard proof. Sure enough, within days, I caught her sneaking Brandon into the house while I was working late. They didn't even have the decency to use the guest room. Step 2: Digging into the finances. The money Richard had mentioned at the hotel haunted me. I knew Amanda had access to our joint account, but I couldn't figure out how she was siphoning money without me noticing. So, I called up my bank and requested a detailed transaction history. What I found was staggering. Over the past year, Amanda had been transferring small amounts of money, $500 here, $1,000 there, to a mysterious offshore account. The amounts were small enough not to raise immediate suspicion, but they added up to nearly $60,000. I hired a private investigator to help me trace the account. Within days, he uncovered the shocking truth: the account was in Amanda's name, but Richard was listed as a co-signer. They were using my hard-earned money to fund their secret escapades. Step 3: Setting the trap. I knew I couldn't confront Amanda or Richard outright, not yet. If I tipped them off, they'd cover their tracks, and I'd lose my chance to expose them. Instead, I decided to play the long game. I reached out to Brandon, Mark, and Tyler separately, pretending to be anonymously concerned about their involvement with Amanda. Using a burner phone, I sent each of them text messages like, "Did you know Amanda is seeing other men besides you? Thought you should know. You're not the only one. Check her phone if you don't believe me." The goal was simple: sow chaos among her little harem. Sure enough, within days, I noticed the tension. Brandon stopped coming around as frequently. Mark looked visibly annoyed when I accidentally bumped into him at one of Amanda's work events. Tyler, ever the hothead, even sent Amanda a furious text that I saw pop up on her phone screen one evening. "How many guys are you seeing, Amanda?" Meanwhile, I started planting seeds of doubt at Amanda's office. I made a few anonymous tips to HR, suggesting that Richard was engaging in inappropriate relationships with his employees. While I didn't expect the company to act immediately, I knew it would put him on edge. Step 4: The fake investor. The next part of my plan required some creativity. Knowing Richard's greed, I decided to bait him with the one thing he couldn't resist: money. Using the help of my private investigator, I created a fake persona: James Carter, a wealthy investor interested in expanding into real estate. I set up a professional-looking LinkedIn profile, complete with fake endorsements and a portfolio of projects I'd supposedly funded. Through a mutual connection at Amanda's agency, I managed to get Richard's email address and sent him a message from James Carter. "Mr. Hawthorne, I've been following your work in the real estate market and am impressed by your agency's success. I'd like to discuss a potential investment opportunity that could bring significant growth to your business. Let me know if you're interested. Best regards, James Carter." Richard took the bait immediately. He replied within hours, eager to set up a meeting. Over the next few days, we exchanged emails, during which I hinted that I was looking for a discreet partnership and was willing to invest $2 million, provided Richard could prove his agency's integrity. Of course, I had no intention of giving him a dime. The goal was to lure him into a position where his greed would expose his true nature. Step 5: The paper trail. While juggling all of this, I continued gathering evidence against Amanda. I documented every suspicious transaction, every late-night outing, and every lie she told me. I even recorded our conversations when she tried to gaslight me about her whereabouts. But the pièce de résistance was the hotel footage. Using my investigator's connections, I obtained security footage of Amanda entering the hotel with Richard and the others on multiple occasions. The videos were damning, showing her cozying up to each of them like she didn't have a husband waiting at home. Step 6: Bringing in the lawyer. Once I had everything I needed, I contacted a divorce attorney. I laid out all the evidence, from the financial theft to the infidelity. My lawyer was stunned by the sheer audacity of Amanda's actions but assured me we had a rock-solid case. The plan was simple. I would confront Amanda with everything at the perfect moment, ensuring there were witnesses. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal, not just from me, but from everyone around her. Step 7: The calm before the storm. By the time everything was in place, weeks had passed. Amanda was still living her double life, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She even had the audacity to ask me if I could pick up the slack with some bills because she was going through a rough patch. I smiled and said, "Of course, honey, anything for you." Little did she know, her rough patch was about to turn into an avalanche. Everything was set. Weeks of planning had come down to this moment. I was no longer the naive, trusting husband Amanda had so easily manipulated. I was someone she would regret crossing for the rest of her life. I picked a Saturday for my grand unveiling, a day Amanda would be home, unsuspecting, and completely unprepared. I'd orchestrated a situation where every piece of her betrayal would come crashing down on her at once. Step 1: The confrontation at home. It started with Amanda's phone. The night before, while she was in the shower, I accessed her messages using a tool I had installed to mirror her phone on my laptop. Sure enough, she was texting all 3 of her men. "Brandon, can't wait to see you next week. I miss your hands all over me. Mark, let's meet up for lunch tomorrow, my treat. Don't forget that thing we talked about. Tyler, you've got me hooked, babe. How do you keep us all addicted?" Reading these messages made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was all part of the plan. The next morning, I told Amanda I was heading out to run errands, but would be back in a few hours. In reality, I was heading to the lawyer's office to finalize my next move. Before leaving, I left an envelope on the kitchen counter, labeled "Open immediately." Inside were printouts of the bank statements showing her theft, screenshots of her text messages with her boyfriends, and photographs from the hidden camera in our bedroom. I knew she'd open it the moment I left, and I knew her reaction would be nothing short of chaos. Step 2: The office bombshell. While Amanda was at home, likely panicking over the evidence I'd laid out, I was on my way to Richard's office. Thanks to the fake investor persona I had created, I'd scheduled a business meeting with him that morning. When I arrived, Richard greeted me with a smug grin, clearly thinking he was about to secure a multi-million-dollar deal. We sat in his sleek, glass-walled office, and he launched into his sales pitch, bragging about his agency's success and his visionary leadership. I let him ramble for a while before pulling out a folder of my own. "Richard," I interrupted, placing the folder on the table, "before we move forward, there's something we need to address." He looked confused but curious. "What's this?" "Evidence," I replied, my voice calm but icy. "Evidence of your affair with my wife, your involvement in stealing money from me, and your role in ruining my life." The color drained from his face as he opened the folder and saw the photographs, financial records, and text messages. He stammered, trying to deny it, but I cut him off. "Save it," I said, leaning forward. "This meeting isn't about a business deal. It's about accountability. You've taken everything from me, Richard, and now it's time for me to take something from you." As I spoke, I pressed send on my phone, emailing the evidence to Richard's boss, his HR department, and the board of directors. Within minutes, his phone started buzzing with calls and messages. He looked at me, panic etched across his face. "You're finished," I told him, standing up. "And this is just the beginning." Step 3: The public exposure. While Richard was scrambling to salvage his career, I moved on to phase 3: public humiliation. I'd rented out a private room at one of the city's upscale restaurants and invited Amanda, Brandon, Mark, Tyler, and a few of her close friends. The invitation read: a special lunch to celebrate Amanda. Amanda arrived first, looking nervous but intrigued. I could see the relief on her face when she spotted me, clearly hoping this was some kind of reconciliation. "What's this about?" she asked, glancing around the room. "You'll see," I said, smiling coldly. As the others arrived, Brandon, Mark, and Tyler included, the tension in the room grew. Amanda's face turned pale as she realized what was happening. Once everyone was seated, I stood up and began my speech. "Thank you all for coming," I started, my voice calm and steady. "Today, we're here to celebrate Amanda, my loving wife, who has spent the past year lying, cheating, and stealing from me." Gasps filled the room. Amanda tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand to silence her. "Let me show you what I mean," I continued, pulling out a tablet and playing the footage from the hidden camera in our bedroom. The room fell silent as Amanda's infidelity played out on the screen. Brandon, Mark, and Tyler looked horrified, each realizing they weren't the only ones. Amanda, meanwhile, was in tears, begging me to stop. "Why should I stop?" I asked, my voice rising. "You didn't stop when you betrayed me, Amanda. You didn't stop when you drained our bank account or when you laughed about it with these men." I ended the presentation with the financial records, showing how she and Richard had stolen from me. By the time I was done, Amanda was a sobbing mess, and the room was buzzing with whispers and accusations. Step 4: The legal hammer. The next day, Amanda was served with divorce papers. But these weren't ordinary papers. Thanks to my lawyer, I was suing her for financial fraud, demanding restitution for the money she had stolen. Richard, too, was facing the consequences. Not only had he been fired from his job, but his wife had also filed for divorce after learning about his infidelity. Brandon, Mark, and Tyler? They all turned on Amanda, each accusing her of manipulation and deceit. The fallout was catastrophic, and Amanda had nowhere to turn. Step 5: The final blow. The final piece of my revenge came a week later when I publicly shared Amanda's actions on social media. I posted a detailed account of her betrayal, complete with evidence, ensuring that everyone in our social circle knew the truth. The post went viral, garnering hundreds of comments and shares. Amanda's reputation was utterly destroyed, and she became a social pariah overnight. The day Amanda's downfall became public knowledge was the day I began to feel free. The weight of betrayal, humiliation, and anger that I had carried for so long was finally replaced with a sense of vindication. But her fall from grace was far from over, and what followed over the next few months only deepened her spiral into chaos. Amanda's life unravels. Once the social media post exposing Amanda's infidelity and financial crimes went viral, she became the talk of the town, but not in the way she had always dreamed. Instead of admiration, Amanda became the subject of gossip, ridicule, and outright scorn. Her friends, the ones who had once hung on her every word during brunches and girls' nights, quickly distanced themselves from her. I even heard from a mutual acquaintance that one of her closest friends, Rachel, publicly confronted her in a coffee shop, calling her a liar and gold digger loud enough for everyone to hear. Rachel, as it turned out, had suspected Amanda of trying to seduce her own husband at one point. Amanda, red-faced and tearful, had stormed out without saying a word. At work, Amanda's troubles only worsened. Word of her affair with her boss, Richard, spread quickly through the company. HR launched an investigation into their relationship, especially when they found out about the fraudulent activities I had exposed. It didn't take long for Amanda to lose her job. She was escorted out of the building by security, carrying nothing but a cardboard box of her belongings. Her lavish lifestyle, her designer handbags, luxury spa days, and expensive dining was now a distant memory. Without a job or income, Amanda struggled to maintain her image. She sold off her luxury car and downsized to a small, dingy apartment in a less desirable part of town. Even her appearance changed, no more expensive hair treatments or designer clothes. She looked like a shadow of the woman she once was. Richard's collapse. Richard, the man Amanda had betrayed me for, didn't fare much better. After being fired from his position, he faced lawsuits from other clients who accused him of mishandling their investments. His wife, Marissa, wasted no time filing for divorce, taking the kids, the house, and a significant chunk of his dwindling assets. He attempted to reach out to Amanda, probably hoping they could console each other in their shared misery, but she wanted nothing to do with him. From what I heard, Amanda blamed him for everything, calling him a selfish coward who had ruined her life. The irony was delicious. The three boyfriends, Brandon, Mark, and Tyler, were quick to cut ties with Amanda after learning about each other and her deception. Brandon, the gym trainer, confronted her at the restaurant during my big reveal, calling her a manipulative snake. Mark, the lawyer, sent her a formal cease and desist letter, demanding she never contact him again. Tyler, the wannabe musician, wrote a scathing song about her titled Fool's Paradise, which gained a small following online and added to her public humiliation. Amanda's attempts at reconciliation. After her life had fallen apart, Amanda made several attempts to reconcile with me. At first, she tried the classic apology and regret angle, sending long, tear-filled text messages about how she had made a terrible mistake and still loved me. One message read, "I was so stupid, Logan. I let my selfishness and insecurities ruin the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, let me make it right. I'll do whatever it takes." I ignored her. When the messages didn't work, she showed up at my house uninvited. One evening, I opened the door to find her standing there, disheveled and crying, holding a bottle of cheap wine as a peace offering. "Logan, please," she begged, her voice trembling. Just give me one chance to explain. I've lost everything. I need you. I didn't let her pass the threshold. You didn't need me when you were with Richard, Brandon, Mark, and Tyler, I replied coldly. Why should I need you now? Her face crumpled, but I felt nothing. I simply shut the door and walked away. The legal victory. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Thanks to the mountain of evidence I had gathered, Amanda was ordered to pay restitution for the money she had stolen from me during her affair. Of course, she couldn't afford to pay the full amount, so her assets were liquidated. The judge also granted me a clean divorce, and Amanda received no alimony, an outcome that left her completely broke. My new beginning. While Amanda's life spiraled downward, mine was on an upward trajectory. With the legal battles behind me, I poured my energy into rebuilding myself. I expanded my real estate business, landing several lucrative deals that made up for the financial losses I had suffered. I also took time to focus on my own well-being. Therapy helped me process the pain of Amanda's betrayal, and I began to see it as a blessing in disguise. It had forced me to reevaluate my life, my values, and my goals. And then there was Jennifer. Jennifer was a friend I had reconnected with during the fallout with Amanda. She was everything Amanda wasn't: kind, genuine, and supportive. Our connection grew slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. By the time my divorce was finalized, we were inseparable. Amanda's final descent. The last I heard about Amanda was through a mutual acquaintance. She had tried to reinvent herself as a life coach on social media, but the endeavor failed miserably. People mocked her for giving advice when her own life was a train wreck. She eventually moved out of state, presumably to escape the constant reminders of her fall from grace. Reflection. Looking back, I sometimes marvel at how far I've come since the day I first discovered Amanda's betrayal. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life and finding happiness on my own terms. Amanda thought she could destroy me, but in the end, I was the one who rose from the ashes. And as for her? Well, some lessons are learned the hard way.